The word trauma comes from the Greek for wound. In psychology, it refers not just to the event but to the lasting change in the nervous system that an overwhelming experience creates. Psychiatrist Bess in his 2014 landmark work The Body Keeps the Score, argued that trauma is stored not primarily in conscious memory but in the body itself, in patterns of muscle tension, autonomic arousal, and sensory flashback. This body-first understanding overturned decades of purely cognitive approaches to trauma treatment and opened the door to somatic therapies that work directly with the nervous system. The ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences, conducted by Kaiser Permanente and the CDC beginning in 1995, surveyed over 17,000 adults about childhood trauma including abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. The findings were startling. Higher ACE scores correlated not just with mental health problems but with dramatically increased rates of heart disease, cancer, autoimmune disorders, and early mortality. The study established that childhood adversity is not merely a psychological concern but a public health crisis with lifelong biological consequences. Adults with 4 or more ACEs had a 12-fold increase in suicide attempt risk compared to those with none. Somatic experiencing, developed by Dr. Peter Levine, draws on observations of how animals in the wild naturally discharge stress responses. A gazelle that escapes a predator will tremble and shake for several minutes after the danger has passed, a spontaneous discharge of the mobilized survival energy. Levine proposed that humans, who typically suppress such responses due to social conditioning, instead store the unresolved arousal in the body. This stored activation manifests later as hyperarousal, chronic pain, dissociation, or the explosive emotional reactivity characteristic of trauma. Somatic experiencing seeks to safely complete the interrupted survival responses. Complex PTSD, or CPTSD, is distinguished from single-incident PTSD by its origins in prolonged, repeated trauma, typically involving interpersonal violence or captivity. First proposed by psychiatrist Judith Herman in her 1992 book Trauma and Recovery, CPTSD describes a constellation of symptoms beyond the core PTSD criteria: profound disturbances in self-organization, including emotional dysregulation, negative self-concept, and distorted relationships. The ICD-11, the World Health Organization's diagnostic manual, formally recognized CPTSD as a distinct diagnosis in 2018, although the DSM-5 has not yet followed suit. Dissociation is one of the most misunderstood trauma responses. Ranging from mild disconnection, such as driving and not remembering the route, to severe fragmentation of identity, dissociation is the mind's emergency override. When experience is too overwhelming to be processed in real time, consciousness detaches from it. Neuroscience research shows that dissociative states involve reduced activity in the medial prefrontal cortex and altered connectivity in the default mode network. For many trauma survivors, what looks like emotional numbness or unreliability is actually an automatic protection mechanism that once kept them functional. The field of trauma treatment has evolved significantly in the past 2 decades. Beyond traditional talk therapy, evidence-based approaches now include EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which uses bilateral stimulation to help the brain process frozen traumatic memories, somatic therapies that work directly with the body, and internal family systems therapy, which addresses the fragmented self-states that form in response to early adversity. Research by Bessel van der Kolk found that yoga produced greater PTSD symptom reduction than any medication in his sample. The emerging consensus is that effective trauma treatment must engage the body, not just the mind.